Senator Portman, thank you. Mr. Saade, you gave very safe answers today to Senator Portman in some of his questions here and talked through. I am one of those folks that you had described as being one day thrown into the trash heap of history because I'm a Republican and apparently a fascist because I'm a Republican. And you gave a nice, safe answer on it in talking about capitalism. But I do have some concerns because you are dealing with millions of people that are federal workers and their investments and the decisions based on those investments. When it wasn't just a 2017 article that you've written on these issues, you've also written just in 2020, you wrote that the current path is not sustainable for society, the productive use of private property and capital in a competitive market. And then you said capitalism is the problem here. And your very clear statement was a reboot of capitalism. Can you describe to me, before you deal with the investment decisions of millions of federal workers, what do you mean by a reboot of capitalism?
Thank you, Senator Lankford. The answer I gave Senator Portman, I don't believe is a safe answer. I think is the actual answer. Throughout my career, 30-year career, my ideas or my personal views have always been subordinate to duties to the organization. And as you have seen throughout my career, I have been in profit-making, investment, operating, and governance roles. I acknowledge, though, that I am aware of things that are happening writ large in the, not only in the investment world, but in our country. And some of what I write is not, none of what I write is dispositive or definitive. It's just my perspective as to us staying abreast of the things that are happening. Look, the private sector, back to the a lot of these questions, the private sector, all of it is looking at this on its own. The Investment Company Institute, it's its roundtable. These are not charities. These are the most iconic companies in the United States, emblems of our capitalist system.
Right. I'm not asking about those companies. I'm asking about a specific perspective. And the reason I ask this is very specific. Federal workers at their retirement are counting on individuals with a fiduciary responsibility to be able to handle their funds in a way that they can manage retirement, not based on political goals. Right now, the primary entity that's actually running all of our federal retirements is BlackRock. I don't know of a more activist investor group than is BlackRock. They are the primary on the F fund, the C fund, the S fund. If I go through and look for the actual investments that they're doing, if I take the top investments in the C fund, it's Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, that's Google, Tesla, Meta, that's Facebook, Berkshire Hathaway. It's all kind of managed by BlackRock. And while there's this perspective to be able to say we're going to stay out of politics, my simple question to you, are we really trying to be able to stay out of politics even currently in those funds? And what are we looking for? So let me just ask you a frank question. If there's a recommendation to be able to take on an oil and gas stock, to say that's a wise investment for federal employees, would you agree to be able to take on an oil and gas stock?
It's probably worth a little bit of explanation as to how those funds actually work. They're passively managed, which means that they represent the economy as a whole in whatever asset class you are exposed to. So when the Congress set this up in 1986, the constituent parts of the C fund, for example, were the biggest companies then. Most of the biggest companies now didn't even exist in the 80s and 90s. So
I'm aware. It's a straightforward question here. Would you invest in a fund that also includes oil and gas?
The C fund includes oil and gas.
I'm not asking what exists. Would you? I'm looking towards the future. If you were to be on this, would you recommend that?
You're talking about my personal investment? Or are you talking about what I would recommend?
No, I'm talking about what you'd recommend as a fiduciary for federal employees.
The Thrift is a fiduciary, and being exposed to every part of our economy, including oil and gas, is the right thing to do, which is what the C Fund does today. Yes.
Thank you. I do need to ask some questions to our IG, Mrs. Boyd. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your work already that you've done on this. When I talk to federal employees, when they reach retirement, they're nervous as they reach retirement because they don't know how quickly it's going to actually begin, because OPM has been such a disaster in helping our federal employees actually transition into retirement. It takes months at times when they're exposed. If they get on the phone and call someone at OPM, 2/3 of those calls go to a busy signal or they're not answered. That's an enormous problem for those federal employees as they reach retirement. They have served often for decades, sometimes in several different agencies, and then they reach this retirement fund, and literally the federal government that they've served now doesn't serve them or becomes the problem on it. That's been around for a while. How are you planning on helping us provide some transparency and a set of answers that can be implemented at OPM?
Thank you, Senator, for the opportunity to address this issue. The delays in retirement benefits is a serious problem. It's one where the OPM OIG has included it on their top management challenges, and it really goes to the core of OPM's outdated IT systems. There's, the agency's still using a paper-based system, and that's something that has to change. And so if confirmed, I would work with the OIG staff to identify whether there are additional areas where the OIG can press the agency as a part of its modernization efforts. I know the agency's aware of it, but to really take action quickly, and as a part of that, also addressing the customer service problems, because that's another area where the OIG has identified serious issues that the agency just, has not taken enough action to address the customer service issue. So I would work with the OIG staff and identify what, first of all, pressing on the open recommendations, but then also identifying additional areas of work.
This is an area that all of us are counting on people stepping in and proposing solutions. We all see the problem, and the problem's been out there for a while. OPM's not been able to manage this for a while, and they need somebody that can step in and say, here's a way to be able to solve it. And so from this committee to you, when you step into this IG role that's been open now for 6 years, it is important that somebody steps in and says, here's a way to be able to fix this. It's going to take years. It's going to take dollars. We all understand that. But we've got to be able to see something that's not just an excuse of it's not getting done, but actually proposing it. So I appreciate you stepping up to this, because it is a very complicated set of issues. So our hope is, and my hope is, that of the multitude of issues to be able to deal with, that you would deal with that one as the highest priority, because that's been sitting out there so long undone. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Lankford. Senator Carper, you're recognized for your questions.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And our thanks to each